I can't see anything.
So should be back live now.
I turned off my own.
Should be back live now. Sorry about that. For some reason, our connection got interrupted, and I don't know why, because I am hardwired into our Ethernet connection. So if you could just, if you are with it, and actually I don't have anybody watching live, so I'm talking to nobody. So we'll give everybody a chance to kind of come back here.
Did you take a comment?
Yep, so I have one person back. If you're back with us and you are able to hear me, could you just type into the chat box that you are back with us? For some reason, we lost our signal. So again, if you're back with us, see 3 people are watching again. If you're back with us, could you just type into the chat box that you are able to hear and see us? We can resume our lesson. All right, so we have Roberta saying she's back. Dennis is here. So it sounds like we're working again. Again, sorry about that. We don't know what happened. We are hardwired into the Ethernet connection here at church. So there really is no reason for our stream to have gotten cut off. But for whatever reason it was. So I apologize for that. We're back live. We're talking about why verse 4 should probably not be, we should not consider it a part of what the original story that John wrote down, but was added as a textual, it slipped in to the transmission of the text over time. And again, ultimately the reason why I would see that is because of just because it's superstitious, and the Lord does not like superstition. The Lord tends not to separate his healing power from his personal agency. Even we have a story that the bronze serpent that Moses had crafted, people were beginning to treat it like a magical charm, and so it had to be melted down because the Lord didn't want people worshiping the bronze serpent. This is why I don't think we'll ever find the manuscripts of the original books of the Bible, because we would turn them into idols. That's why I don't think we're ever going to find Noah's Ark, because if we found Noah's Ark, we would all go and say, "Oh, isn't it great that we found Noah's Ark?" instead of worshiping the God who saved the world through the ark. So the way that I really think we should have approached verse 4, it's helpful in the fact that it helps us understand the legend or what people at that time believed would happen. But I don't think that we're bound to believe that that's what happened. I think there are much more. There's a natural explanation for it, the bubbling of the springs. And that fits much more with what we know about God and how he works and how he heals. Okay, but we're going to move on now to the second section. We're going to read verses 6 through the first part of verse 9. You may know, if you don't know, I'm telling you now, that the verses, the way the verses are divided in the Bible is not inspired. Okay, there was a middle-aged monk who took upon himself the job of versifying the Bible. It's a very helpful tool. I mean, if you think about before we had verses, how difficult it would be to talk about a specific verse in a specific chapter. But, and I also say that for the most part, this monk did a great job, but he had some bad days. And this is an example of the bad day. Verse 9 is really way too long. So we're going to read verses 6 through 9a. So verse 6, when Jesus saw this man who had been sick for 38 years, lying there, and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. So there are a couple of things that we need to say about these verses. And the first is the question that Jesus asks. Sir, do you want to get well? Or just, do you want to get well? And commentators have said that may be the dumbest question that Jesus ever asked. Why would you look at a man who's been sick for 38 years and say, do you want to get well? Why would you look at a man who's gone through all the effort of showing up here at the pools of Bethesda on the slim chance that he might be able to get into the pool ahead of everybody else to get healed, and ask him the question, do you want to get well? So there are some people who are very critical of Jesus' question here, do you want to get well? Obviously, though, I think we need to be careful about charging Jesus with asking stupid questions. If Jesus asks the question, instead of saying, why did Jesus ask that question? How stupid is Jesus? We should ask ourselves, why would Jesus ask that question? What is it about the man that leads Jesus to ask the question? And so I think it says something about the man that Jesus asks him this question. Do you really want to be well? Now just remember that, because I think that him beginning the conversation this way helps us understand how Jesus is going to end the conversation with the man in verses 14 and 15. Okay, so just remember that. We also have to kind of think about the man's answer. If you want to be really charitable to the man who's healed, you'd say that the man's answer is very sincere. That the man is in essence saying to Jesus, I want to get well so much that I show up here every day, even though I know I'm never going to be able to get into the pool. That's one way of reading his answer. However, we should note that in these verses, in this whole pericope, verses 1 through 15, the man is depicted in a very negative light. He immediately, he does not seek out Jesus after he's healed, trying to find the man to thank. He's not the least bit shy about saying to the Jewish leaders, when some heat comes on him because he picked up his mat and walked, he's not the least bit shy about saying, hey, don't blame me. It was that other guy who healed me. It was his fault. And then ultimately at the end of the pericope, we're going to have Jesus coming to this man and saying, you better stop sinning or something worse is going to happen to you, which is maybe an indication that the man was living a sinful lifestyle. So it's also possible to read the man's answer in kind of a sarcastic way. His way of saying, no, Jesus, I don't want to be healed. I just show up here for fun. I just show up here because I really like not getting into the water ahead of other people. That's kind of the highlight of my day. So it's very possible that we should read this verse as kind of in a sarcastic way. And that's even D.A. Carson and his commentary kind of suggests that we read it that way. He says, this verse reads less as an apt and subtle response to Jesus' question than as the crotchety grumblings of an old and not very perceptive man who thinks he is answering a stupid question. So that's kind of how I've always understood this exchange. Now you might say, well, so what? Why is that important? Well, it emphasizes the grace of Jesus. He is not looking to heal the best people. He's not looking to heal the nice people. He's not looking to heal the people who will give Jesus all the credit and all the praise. Jesus comes looking for the scummy people, for the sarcastic people, for the people who have kind of given up on religion, who've kind of given up on God. And that's a great comfort to us, because the reality is that we are not always the good people. He has come to seek and to save the lost. And that means that he has come to seek and to save me. And it means he's come to seek and to save you. So the fact that this is not the nicest guy ever is a part of the depiction that emphasizes the grace of Christ. Notice that the man does not see Jesus and saying, oh, look, it's Jesus. I wonder if he can heal me. Hey, Jesus, can you heal me? That's what happened in the last chapter with the official. The official initiates the whole miracle. But in this context, Jesus initiates the miracle. Jesus is the one who takes note of the man. He is the one who starts the conversation. And even though he gets a sarcastic response, Jesus is the one who follows through with the miracle. John.
In verse 6, why did Jesus need to learn that he had been in this condition?
Good.
Because even in his human nature, he is omniscient.
Yeah, so the question is, and so John has pointed out, this is a weakness of the NIV 2011. I have this, the NIV actually, it's both versions. And I have this in the notes. The Greek word there is the common word for know, the word that is normally translated know. So really, if you're just reading the Greek, it says Jesus looked at the man and knew that he had been in this condition for a long time. So the word learn there is misleading, because it kind of makes it sound like Jesus sees the man and starts asking questions like, who is this guy? And how long has he been coming here? And what's wrong with him? And those kind of things. But really what we have here is an exercise of Jesus' divinity. Jesus is this is the first miracle of John 5. The miracle that John looks at the man and knows his whole history. Again, not just knows the fact that he was sick for 38 years. He knows that. But he also seems to know that the reason the man was sick is because he lives a sinful lifestyle. That he needs to be confronted with his sin. He needs to leave his life of sin, or else something worse is going to happen to him. So first of all, it's kind of a black eye for the NIV. The ESV, this is a translation that I think very little of. But the ESV is much better here, just translating it new instead of learned. But John's also raised the issue that I think is important for us to think through. So this is before the resurrection. Jesus is a true human being. What is his relationship to his divine power? Okay. And what we'd have to, this is really what we mean when we talk about the humiliation of Jesus. And what the state of humiliation is that during this period of 33 years, his resurrection, Jesus never loses our glory, our prerogative, our ability. Is removed so that he can be humanity. Humanity is added to his true divinity. His true divinity never goes away. It never disappears. But for those 33 years, by and large, Jesus chooses not to make use of his divinity. The picture is that he takes his divinity. We can just, I'll use an illustration. Imagine that the cup represents Jesus' divinity. And what Jesus says is that for the 33 years that I'm going to walk this earth, I'm going to have to be like all you other schmucks who don't have any divine power. So for these 33 years, I'm just going to set my divinity aside, and I'm not going to use it. So if I want to walk from Judea to Galilee, if I want to get from Judea to Galilee, I'm going to have to walk there just like everyone else. And I'm going to have to get hungry, and I'm going to have to get thirsty, and I'm going to have to get tired, just like everybody else, even though I could at any moment use my divinity to prevent all those things from happening. And yet throughout the Gospels, from time to time, what we see happening is Jesus picking up his divinity again for a moment and using it to prove that he is true God. Anytime Jesus does a miracle, it's him picking up his divinity for a moment. It's not that he ever loses his divinity. It's that for these 33 years, he chooses not to make full and frequent use of his divinity. That's the state of humiliation. And so the question is, how does Jesus learn that this man was sick for 38 years? And the answer is, he learned it by accessing, if you will, his divine powers for a moment, tapping into his omniscience, and knowing everything there is to know about this man, including his sickness, but more importantly, the need that he has for forgiveness, which is what the healing of the sickness really points to. So I have another comment here that we're breaking up a little bit again. Hopefully that's just temporary and passing. So Trish too says that it keeps stopping. So again, I apologize. Maybe we're going to have to find another solution altogether, because this maybe isn't the solution that we thought it was going to be. A couple other things to say. Verse 8, of course, Jesus performs this miracle using nothing but his word. He speaks, and it happens. And so really this miracle looks both backward and forward. It looks backward in the sense that it is reminding us that this Jesus is the same God who called all things into being using nothing but his almighty word. So you read the book of Genesis chapter 1, and the refrain that comes back over and over and over and over again is, and God said, and God said, and God said. So God creates using nothing but his mighty word. And in this sense, Jesus is recreating using nothing but his word. But it also looks forward. Later in this chapter, when Jesus goes toe-to-toe with the Jewish leaders, he's going to talk about Judgment Day on the last day, and about how he is going to speak, and the dead are going to rise from their graves. So what we have here with the healing of the man at the pools of Bethesda through Jesus speaking is a type of the full healing that is going to come to all people on the last day when Jesus speaks and raises the dead with his almighty word. So what we have in miniature, it is healing for one man, is going to happen for all the dead. And it isn't just going to be healing, but it's going to be full resurrection for all the dead on the last day. So that's in the sense that it's a type that looks forward. And then lastly, just notice the completeness of the miracle. So it happens immediately. Jesus doesn't say, take 2 pills every 12 hours and so this isn't a medicinal healing. This is an immediate snap your fingers and it happens kind of healing. And it is a complete healing. It isn't just that the man feels a little stronger, but he's able to take up his mat and walk. That word mat may be a little deceiving to us. Don't think like a yoga mat that you can roll up and take with you to a class, to Pilates class. These mats were kind of like stretchers or cots. They had to be sturdy enough for the sick person to lie on the mat or lie on the cot while his friends carried them on their shoulders. So this has got to be sturdy enough to bear the weight of a grown person. So these mats would have been heavy enough that would have made paralytics or the lame or the weak, they would have been too heavy for them to carry. But of course, not so heavy that a whole person, a well person could carry it. The fact that he goes from not being able to carry it to being able to carry it is a sign that the miracle has taken place, that whatever it was that was afflicting the man has been taken away. And I'm out of time, so I'm kind of inclined to stop right there and pick up next week with the fallout. So in other words, what we're going to look at next week is how the healing of the man is responded to, especially by the Jewish leaders. So we'll pick up there with in the second half of John 5, verse 9, and then we'll go into the showdown. Now, really, the showdown between Jesus and the Jewish leaders is going to take up the rest of John 5, and of course, we're not going to be able to cover the rest of John 5 in one lesson. So it'll probably take at least 2 weeks to cover the rest of John chapter 5 here. So thank you for joining us, especially if you were patiently with us through our technical problems. We'll continue to talk about and explore some ways that we might shore up those technical difficulties. As always, we'll stick around here. If you have any other questions you'd like to type into the chat box, and I can respond to them. But thank you for joining us, and let's close with the blessing. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us always. Amen. God's blessing.